On a late autumn afternoon, as the pale golden sunlight filtered through the tree canopies, creating a serene and melancholic scene, Mr. John sat quietly on a wooden chair on his porch. The last crimson maple leaves were gently falling, twirling in the air like weary dancers after a vibrant summer. He watched them with a distant gaze, as if savoring the tranquility of the moment, while being lost in a stream of memories flowing backward. At nearly 70 years old, Mr. John still retained the graceful demeanor of a man who had once been the backbone of his family. Neighbors often praised his vitality and agility, attributes he attributed to decades of consistent exercise. Every morning, he would begin his day with a jog along the small winding paths of the village, where the quaint old houses remained as peaceful as they had been in his youth. Afterward, he would stop by the local retirement club, a place that not only kept him physically active, but also served as a familiar haven where he could share life's ups and downs with friends of his generation. There, amidst the lively chatter and seemingly trivial tales of old age, he found warmth and simple joys. But today felt different. He hadn't gone out as usual. The clock on the wall had ticked through much of the afternoon, yet the cup of hot tea on the table remained untouched, cold without him noticing. He sighed softly, his eyes drifting to the potted plants he had meticulously cared for over the years. The small bonsai trees, the colorful flower pots, each seemed to be a silent companion, sharing his solitude and accompanying him through the long, quiet days of old age. These plants were not just a hobby. They were vessels of his emotions and patience, cultivated through the many trials of his life. He picked up a small pair of scissors from the table, intending to prune a few branches, but his hand paused midair, and his gaze wandered toward the room inside. "She's probably holding the baby, playing with him in the room," he murmured softly, his voice barely audible, carried away like a breeze. Mary, his wife of over 40 years, no longer spent as much time with him as she once had. Since the birth of their grandchild, she had devoted all her attention to the little one. It seemed she had found new joy, a new sense of purpose, to fill her once idle days. He understood and did not blame her, but deep down, he couldn't help feeling a tinge of sadness, a small emptiness he couldn't quite put into words. The memory of a particular night surfaced in his mind, a time when he had tried to wake her for a late-night chat. "Leave me alone. If the baby cries, everyone will blame me," she had said, not with anger, but as a gentle reminder that her role had shifted. He had grown accustomed to the silence, yet in moments like these, he couldn't help but long for the long evenings they once shared. Back then, they would sit together, recounting their joys and sorrows, sharing small dreams, or simply gazing at the moon. The sunset grew dimmer, leaving a soft orange glow over the scenery. Inside Mr. John, emotions blended the past with the present, joy with loneliness. Time moved forward, and life continued, but deep within him, there remained unspoken thoughts. Things only this autumn could truly understand. Ever since Mary moved into a separate room to take care of their grandchild, a feeling of loneliness had gradually consumed John's heart. He felt like an outsider in his own home, a place he had lived for over 4 decades. While he tried to convince himself that love wasn't important at his age, deep down, he still longed for affection, for care. Even just a little. Every morning, he sought joy at the local retirement club, where he had a close group of friends. They would share stories from their lives and laugh together to ease the loneliness. But whenever he returned home and stepped into his cold, empty room, the emptiness in his heart returned. He often lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, reminiscing about the happy days he had once shared with his wife. One morning, after his usual exercise routine, John stumbled upon a small cafe near the retirement club. The cafe was cozy, simply decorated, yet it exuded a sense of comfort. The cafe owner, a kind-looking middle-aged woman with a bright smile, greeted him warmly. From that day on, John frequently visited the cafe. Initially, it was just to enjoy a hot cup of coffee, but over time, his conversations with the cafe owner became an essential part of his life. Each time he visited, she would greet him with the same cheerfulness. "You're here early. Another long morning run today?" "Yes, I did a few extra laps this morning. Thought I'd stop by for a cup of coffee to refresh myself," he replied, his eyes sparkling with joy. Their conversations revolved around life, the small joys and sorrows of old age. For the first time in a long while, John felt heard and understood. The warmth of their exchanges made him feel young again, helping him forget the loneliness waiting for him at home. Soon, these visits were no longer just about the coffee, but about finding solace and comfort in someone who truly listened. But this newfound peace didn't last long. One morning, while John and the cafe owner were chatting, a friend of Mary's happened to pass by and saw them. The friend, known for her penchant for gossip, wasted no time sharing what she had seen. That evening, Mary waited for John to come home. Her face cold, her tone accusatory. "I heard from someone that you've been sneaking around with the cafe owner. Is it true?" she asked bluntly. Startled, John retorted, "Don't jump to conclusions. I was just having coffee and talking to her. Why are you making this a big deal?" But Mary didn't believe him. Their arguments became more frequent and intense. The story of John's visits to the cafe quickly spread throughout the village, becoming fodder for gossip. John felt humiliated and betrayed, but found himself unable to defend his actions any further. Unable to bear the tension at home and the constant rumors, John decided to leave. He moved into a nearby retirement home, hoping to find peace. Perhaps it'll be better there, he thought. At first, life at the retirement home seemed pleasant. Everything was well organized, from meals to daily routines. He made a few new friends and shared stories with them. But after just a few weeks, he realized life there wasn't what he had imagined. The bland meals and strict rules made him feel stifled. Despite the company of his new friends, he missed the freedom and warmth of his own home. One afternoon, while talking to a fellow resident, John confessed, "I thought leaving home would make things better, but there's no place like your own home." His friend nodded silently, his eyes filled with understanding. A few weeks later, John received a letter from Mary. In the letter, she didn't mention the rumors or their arguments. Instead, she asked how he was doing and shared stories about their grandchild, who often asked about him. The simple words touched John deeply. He remembered the fond memories of their family gatherings, the warmth they used to share. Though Mary rarely expressed her feelings openly, John knew she cared. One day, John made up his mind to return home. When he arrived, he found Mary sitting in the living room, holding their grandchild with a look of joy in her eyes. She glanced at John without saying a word, but her slight nod was enough to tell him everything was forgiven. From that day on, John devoted more time to his family, especially his grandchild. Every afternoon, he would sit on the porch and share stories from his youth, his grandchild's laughter filling the air. The once cold house now seemed warm and lively. John also began to change his perspective on life. Instead of waiting for others to bring him happiness, he started creating it himself. His bonsai plants, a cup of hot tea, and even his morning runs became sources of quiet joy. His relationship with Mary slowly healed as well. Their conversations became more frequent, even if brief, often revolving around the care of their grandchild. John realized that love didn't always need grand gestures. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness and understanding were enough to warm the heart. As time went on, John held on to an invaluable lesson. There's no place like home, and true happiness often comes from the simplest things. Life wasn't perfect, but he learned to cherish what he had. On late autumn afternoons, John would still sit on the porch watching the leaves fall. But now his gaze wasn't distant, it was filled with peace and gratitude. From the day he returned, family life began to change for the better. Mr. John and Mary started spending more time talking to each other. At first, it was just brief exchanges about household chores or small daily matters, but gradually they began sharing longer, more meaningful conversations. The two reminisced about their youthful days, the struggles they overcame together, and the life they built as a family. Mr. John also spent more time with his grandchild. In the mornings, he taught the child how to care for bonsai plants and shared stories from his youth. The sound of the child's laughter filled the house, breathing new life into it. In the evenings, he often sat with Mary on the porch, sipping tea and enjoying the tranquility of their golden years. The arguments were gone, as was the cold distance that had grown between them. Instead, there was understanding and empathy, the very things he thought had disappeared forever. Mr. John realized that even when families face cracks and relationships grow distant, family will always be the most steadfast place to return to. Sometimes all it takes is a bit of patience, an open heart, and a willingness to forgive to mend any conflict. He no longer longed for grand gestures, but instead cherished the small, meaningful moments with his loved ones. Mr. John's story serves as a gentle reminder to us all that, no matter how many challenges or misunderstandings life throws our way, we should never give up on our families. Often, conflicts are just tests, teaching us how to understand and love each other more deeply. If Mr. John's story has warmed your heart or given you something to reflect on, don't forget to subscribe to the Life Stories 365 channel. Every week, we bring you inspiring and meaningful stories to help you recognize the true value of love, forgiveness, and gratitude in life. Let stories like this inspire you to cherish those you hold dear, overcome challenges, and find happiness in life's simplest moments.